I'm Chip Hanna, and this is the For You Leaders podcast featuring Kirk Dando, where we truly go beyond the veneer. You'll experience the raw and the real of leadership. You'll see your feet not miles away from the top. If you did not have a chance to listen to our last episode with Mellie Price, stop this episode right now and listen to the last one. Mellie provides some great insight into being a leader and her unique perspective of being a woman leader.
If you did listen to the last episode, we started to talk about the concept of work-life balance.
But you don't really believe in work-life balance, do you, Kirk?
You're right, Chip. I don't. What I believe in are seasons. We have seasons of time. Work-life balance is just a fallacy. You'll hear me talk about this with Mellie, and she really latched onto the idea and even took it a step further. So listen back into my conversation with Mellie Price.
And I love the notion that you called it seasons, because just the other day I said to one of my colleagues, I feel my change happening because my own process is this: I ingest and digest and absorb, and then I move into wild productivity, and they're sort of cycles. Balance to me does not mean that every day I get everything I ever wanted done. Balance to me means I'm listening to myself, and when I'm in a work groove where I can just crank out, hour after hour after hour of high quality work, I want to ride it. And then those days where it's just, you just can't quite get it going, that's a reprieve. And those cycles are okay and they're natural. And I think that good leaders recognize that different people have different cycles. Creatives have different cycles. Programmers have different cycles. Finance people can get in the crunch zone and just crank it out. And then, you just have to recover. And so I think recognizing the seasons that people have is so critical.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to what you were talking about too. Just recognize your partner, your spouse, even your friend group, depending where you're at and kind of your life, journey, having those discussions before they become issues about those seasons. You can't predict exactly when they're going to come, but you know that they're going to come.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you do.
That's part of that support structure, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And when I was younger, I really struggled with feeling like something was wrong with me if I couldn't be 110% all the time. And now I'm really realizing the momentum breeds momentum, and that it's very natural to need a reprieve to do different types of work. I mean, I think it's interesting how we structure our companies where we have expectations that the human mind is going to be satisfied and fully engaged doing the same thing day in and day out, like a clock every day. I just don't see that being the human condition for the most part.
Yeah. What are some things that you do to kind of break that up? That's a lesson that I had to learn too, is like sometimes I got to just do different things to charge different batteries. I don't have just one battery.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I'm very analytical. I'm a bean counter. I have to have my time where I am just crunching numbers and just spreadsheet mania. And I very much don't want to do that all day, every day. And so for me, finding time to do that, sort of on a regular basis, but where I'm really focused on it helps me satisfy that part. And then the same thing exists for me for legal documents, which as an executive, we often have to review a lot of those documents, and reading is actually challenging for me. I'm a great reader and I have great comprehension, but I'm a scientist. I read very slowly and I read every word. And so it takes a lot of focus. And, when you're a busy person, like everyone who works is, but particularly when you're a busy executive in a lot of meetings, it can be impossible to find 3-4 hours of concentrated focus time for me to read those documents. And yet I get something out of creating the space to do it. And so I literally schedule it in sometimes. Generally it happens organically, but if I feel something kind of, loading up where I'm like, oh, wow, I really need to plow through those documents, then I'll literally put it on the schedule and I'll physically create a space where I turn off my phone and the things that make it more difficult for me to focus. And when I'm in that season, I just get it done. And knowing that is who I am, and knowing that I have to create that space for myself, and then doing it is it's actually really satisfying.
So there's a ton of wisdom in what you just shared. So I want to make sure that people listening really pick up on the nuances of it. One is you've learned to listen to that inner voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other part of it is you sometimes you literally schedule. I mean, all this sounds overly obvious and embarrassingly simple, but so oftentimes I see too many people getting wrapped around the axle with so many reasons why they can't. I mean, very valid reasons. And I just, as we go through the list of things and accomplishments that you've had, you are no doubt a busy person. Yet what happens? Can you remember times where you didn't listen to that inner voice and you did get near burnout? Like, how was that for everyone else around you that was depending upon you?
Oh, well, you'd have to ask them.
I mean, if you had to guess.
I cannot imagine it was very pleasant. Part of knowing yourself is that when I'm overwhelmed, I shut down. I'm not somebody who goes to explosive anger or anything like that. I just sort of shut down and check out, and I become inaccessible. And, when you're a leader, becoming inaccessible is not very effective. So I've gotten feedback really quickly when the people that are used to having regular access and communication with me, start that, hey, can I get on your schedule, type of conversation. And it makes me realize that I'm inaccessible and in some way I'm not taking care of, I call it taking care of business. I'm not taking care of myself. That's my stress reaction. I know that about myself at this point. So
yeah,
actually that means go take care of business and get it together and get back on track.
So, and I want to go on with this a little bit more because this is such a big issue with so many CEOs and executives that I spend time with. And I'm not saying you've cracked the code or I've cracked the code, but I mean, do you have examples of where people were kind of leaning in and were kind of, you kind of looked at your calendar and you said, I don't have any margin for myself or for those times when I need to recharge my batteries? Have you had to have times where you've had to tell people like, no for now, and was that uncomfortable for you, or how do you handle those situations?
Yes, I have had that. I'm experiencing it to a certain extent right now. It has been very difficult for me in the past to say no, not because it's hard to say no, but because I genuinely love doing it all.
Yeah.
It just fills me up. I'd love to have a coffee or two, a lunch, an afternoon meeting, and a dinner with just about every. I'd love that stuff. But the reality is it's not something I can sustain. And so I used to feel like the only way to resolve that was to cancel things. Uh-huh. And I see a lot of my colleagues doing that, the sort of persistent rescheduler type person.
Yep. I've been that person.
Yeah. I've been that person, both legitimately and just not having control of your schedule and double having, weird double bookings and things. Thank God for Google Calendars. What did we do before we shared calendars? But yeah, that persistent rescheduler thing wasn't working for me because it violated really my sense of integrity. I mean, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And, in the last 10 years, I've really tried to honor my schedule. Of course, things come up, but that puts the personal accountability on track. You have to be mindful of what you do put on your schedule, which means when somebody says, hey, I'd love to take you to coffee, sometimes you have to say no. Because for me, if it goes on the schedule, I really do not want to take it off the schedule. That's my...
Yep.
It's my thing.
Yeah. So one more question around this, and then we'll get on some other stuff. I don't want to make you think that this is the core of what we are, but you've really hit a nerve on a big issue for a lot of leaders. So how do you say no? So I ask you, hey, Mellie, we've got, let's go to coffee Thursday. I mean, and it's something that you really want to do and everything else like that. What does no look like for you?
There are some instances where I will just say, unfortunately, I just can't accommodate that in my schedule right now. Generally speaking, if there are things that for me and my universe, I deal with a lot of companies that would like to meet. And so generally I've put some structure in place around my expectations of meeting because people will take your time if you'll give it to them. And so my rule is I'm happy to give you my time if you're willing to do the work to make it meaningful. And so typically I'll say, if I block out time on my schedule, I call it my personal office hours. And if it's companies that want to meet, I'll say, twice a month I hold office hours. And in order to get on that schedule, what I need from you is an agenda for why you'd like to meet, a presentation about your company, and I make them do a little bit of prep work. And the folks that are willing to do the prep work, it's going to be a valuable meeting for both of us. The ones that don't, they kind of disappear.
What are some of the most important things that you have learned?
It goes back to everything we were talking about. I mean, it's been such a journey to get to the point where I realized the value of being yourself. And, it kind of goes back to the authenticity. The thing that I've learned, and my journey has been learning that who you are is unique and therefore valid and therefore valuable. We're all uniquely different. We bring a different set of experiences, a different set of perspectives, different approaches, different communication styles. And that's where the magic is. The magic is in finding the people that you can work with and be very effective with, and building and treating those relationships with the preciousness that they are. I think from corporate America, there is this expectation that working with absolutely everyone is the most important skill set. And I really feel like success is about finding the people you work well with and leaning into that, because of course we can strengthen our weaknesses, but generally speaking, humans are going to be humans, and we lean on our strengths. And so finding people whose strengths are complementary and that together 1 + 1 equals more than 2 is really where the magic happens. It's when you get teams that have exceptional productivity, exceptional creativity, exceptional innovation. The exceptional stuff happens not in the middle of the bell curve, it happens on the ends. And so that authenticity feeds that, and being willing to be who you are, and bring that to the table takes a lot of courage. I mean, it sounds trite to say, be your authentic self, but the truth is it's really hard.
I have a lot of experience, and almost every person I meet, they want to know how to be a great CEO, or they want to know how to be a great executive. And I always have to dismantle that and say, you've got to be who you are and get the people around you. And the tendency is to real quickly, let's go to the processes. Let's read a book about how to be a great team. All right, we got to build trust first, and then we got to do this next, and then we got to do, and we want to systematize and productize, building a great team or being a great leader or being a great. And what you just said is so, so true. And it is that simple and that difficult. You've got to find out who you are, where your strengths are, where your limitations are, and surround yourself with people that complement both of those. So that's just unbelievable advice you just handed out there.
To me, the processes and the tools that come, those are the things you get to do after you've done that first piece. And they're the successful byproduct of building a good team. You don't get to build processes if you don't have momentum first. Processes are useless if you don't have anything to process.
What advice would you give to a brand new founder of a company? And I know you get a chance to do this a lot.
The only real advice I can give somebody who is contemplating making the leap is that you're either ready to do it or you're not. A lot of people come with this, well, I'm thinking about starting my own company. And generally, my feeling is you must not be ready. Right? Because if you show up in front of me and you need to talk about what you're thinking about starting your own company. And I'm saying this as a gross generalization, if you're still thinking about it, you're not ready. Because when you show up and you say, I'm starting my own company, and here's kind of my rough plan and my rough budget. And, that's when you're ready to do it. I say this a lot, but when you know, and until you know, you don't know. And so listening to that is probably the most important advice I could give a young founder. When you know, and when you don't.
People listening to this no doubt are going to want to find out more about you, maybe follow you on Twitter, whatever that might be. Share some ways that people can connect or at least follow you and know more about you.
Sure. At Mellie Price, MELLIEPRICE on Twitter. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Google search. You can find me. No problems.
I want to thank Mellie once again for being on For You Leaders podcast. Hopefully, she provided you with some insight. I know she did for me. And what it takes to really be a great leader and even a great founder. What do you think of work-life balance? Is there really such a thing? Or are there seasons? I want you to take some time and reflect on some of the points you heard from Mellie. How do you go about scheduling your time? How do you learn to say no? How do you have a support system when things get really rough or hairy? We have more incredible, thoughtful, insightful interviews from great leaders coming up. Make sure to subscribe to the For You Leaders podcast at foryouleaders.com. Once again, that's foryouleaders.com. I'd also like to know what you think of this podcast so far. Will you do me a favor, and would you please send us your feedback on foryouleaders.com? Thank you for listening.